Mainstream is nice and it works and it's safe. It's just the world was craving different. And if we're meant to be delivering different, but then we go back to the old, soon a lot of podcasts and other platforms are going to fizzle out and then we're going to pretend to be shocked as to what's going on. You're like,
I will say they'll send baningi.
kakulu.
Noma ubani nje ovuka ekuseni ovuka out ngenza podcast. There is and I'm the one who talks about democratizing content.
Yes.
Right? But at the same time, wonke umuntu nje ovukayo ekuseni sengizoba ne-podcast. We also just have some really, really dumb stuff out there.
Of course.
And I suppose that's the democratization of content, right? But sometimes I'm just like, segungning. But I guess for yourself, you filter it out.
If you can. I tweeted a couple of days ago that we need fewer podcasters, fewer DJs, and we need more people building the plumbing, the electrical, the construction.
I saw that tweet.
And people are like, and I'm like, that's not the point of the tweet. The tweet is not stop podcasting. The tweet is build something. If you podcast, sure. Nakona, if awuko blind, then I don't know, man. It makes more sense to do something else.
Yeah, I like it. It's too much, and it's not all great. In fact, there's much less that's great.
Sadly.
Than what is. So yeah.
You're an honorable member now.
Yes.
Honorable Nobuntu.
You know what I find odd and cringe?
Yeah.
Is when people introduce themselves as honorable.
To normal people.
Yes.
That's going to be you in a few years.
My name is Honorable Nobuntu Hlazo-Webster. Like,
that's going to be you in a few years.
Why am I going to introduce
You're going to adjust to the culture.
So actually, that is a very, 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 very important conversation. Over to the whole point why some people like me get into politics is because we've got too many politicians and the politicians are not us. And it becomes a problem when you start to become a politician in the politician culture.
Yeah.
It becomes a problem. And it's tempting. It is so tempting. It's tempting all the time. It's tempting. Politics has a weird culture. So, first of all, politics has a culture of bugan mina, bega mina.
Of course.
Right? And part of it is important because if people don't know what you're doing, then what is the point?
Sure.
Secondly, there's somebody who's a mentor figure of sorts who once said, you're in politics and you're speaking to a group of us. You're going into or transitioning into politics because you want power. And I was like, no, I don't want power. I wanna change the world, I wanna make a difference. And she was like, but you would change it in other ways. Except politics, if you didn't want power. So there's also the reality that you do need power to change things. And you do. And that's why politics exists. Because it's a platform that actually gives you the power to change things. You say lots of important things that we need to think about, that we need to be doing. But you can say them every day without the power to actually make them happen. They will end up as good thoughts, as good philosophies that are not happening. So I say this to say, there's a lure in politics to be about begamina. Look at me, here's what I'm doing, here's all of that. And for me, there's something that takes away from Ubuntu in that, right? But at the same time, you need people to see what you're doing. Because how do you get to a point where you've amassed enough power for change? If you don't have people behind you, if you're not representing people and they're not contributing to what you're doing and they don't know what you're doing, they can't see what you're doing. So that's just one part of it.
Sounds like you're already slowly starting to sell out.
No.
What happened to One South Africa?
What do you mean what happened to One South Africa?
What happened?
The organization.
I mean, you're woman first.
Yeah.
You're very much about, I'd like to think you were, about decentralizing, empowering. Do you feel like you're slowly starting to sell out or?
No. I feel like actually it was really, really good to have a break in December, Jan, to reflect and think. I think I'm more fired than ever about what I got into politics for.
Sure.
More fired than ever. I don't think I'm starting to sell out. I think I understand that I need to be independent of thought in a space that is tempting. So that's the second temptation. The first temptation is to become about yourself.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, even in you positioning yourself, it should never be about yourself. It should be about the people you represent. And it should be about you amplifying voices, right? And amplifying the needs, finding a way to even amplify what you're saying, as an example, as a citizen. So the second part of that I'm saying is that it's important that you keep independence of voice. It's important that you don't start to sound like a politician. It's important that you don't start to think like a politician. It's important that you're always thinking like the citizen that you are, like the citizen that has needs, that like the citizens that are around you. That is important. And I'm more resolved about that more than anything else. I'm more resolved about not getting to a place where, I'm more about that the diplomacy even of politics, and about saying what's real, and about saying what needs to happen, and about doing it, and about finding ways to do it. So selling out, no. But I am honest about the fact that it's very tempting to get into the culture of politics. It's tempting, and you have to be conscious, and you have to find the ways and things that bring you back to consciousness. For me, because I spent a lot of time as an SMME with SMMEs, that's one of the spaces that brings me back to consciousness. Spending a lot of time, and now I spend a lot of time with SMMEs. I spend a lot of time doing work, even in my own portfolio committees. It's about business and it's about economy.
Yeah.
My fire is about economic justice.
Yeah.
It always has been.
Yeah.
And so I spend a lot of time in that keeps me real and true to what I'm about. Like what Parliament has become for me is a space to actually not just hold accountability, but influence what is happening in those portfolios and in those departments. And ultimately, properly shape the fact that I want to do more of this. I want actually more power to be able to actually affect this.
Yeah.
Because right now I have a level of power that this space gives me. But I want to be able to affect this properly. I want to be able to affect economic justice properly. Sure. And that's what it's given me. Like I'm so committed to that, man. The most recent conversations around expropriation, for me, were not about expropriation. They were actually about economic redress and where we actually stand with that. Expropriation was just the mechanism that happened to be in the spotlight at the moment. But for me, it's broadly about how do we get economic justice and how do we get this country to a place where there's equal opportunity and equity of opportunity.
Do you think being in Parliament can be distracting for what you're trying to achieve? I've heard a lot of different MPs in the past speaking about what they're passionate about. I'll speak about someone I like. I don't have to mention her party. Umam Kaula will speak about rural areas, making sure there's water and those things. And I sometimes worry that the whole point of being in Parliament means you also have to look at all the other things you don't care about. And I sometimes worry, is it not distracting? So let's say you're there for economic justice, but then you have to sit and listen to things that you're like, hey, do I need to be here? And you're like, well, you're an MP. You have to listen.
So the reality for me, everything leads to economic justice. Like all of it. For me, all of it leads to that. Because I'm fortunate that I sit in the Trade and Industry Portfolio Committee. And I'm fortunate because there was a scramble for within our smaller parties for that seat. So I'm grateful that I get to sit on that. I sit on the Small Business Development Portfolio Committee. I sit as an alternate on basic education. And I sit on water and sanitation. All that stuff for me is directly linked to economy. But everything else that happens in Parliament, whether you're talking about human settlements, whether you're talking about safety and
foreign
departments
policy.
of police, foreign policy,
Yeah,
flickering all of it.
so at least it suits you.
It for me.
You don't think the other guys get distracted?
I don't think so. I mean, you make an example of Imam Kaula who's about rural development. In all of these things I've spoken about, you've got to come back to how does it affect rural citizens?
Yeah.
All of it, all of the stuff I've just spoken about. And how can you improve the rural areas in this country, and how can you make them safer if they're not safe? All of that. How can you make sure there's water there? So I think it's about you, Pen. I genuinely think it's about you. It's about you and having a focus on what and why you're there. You see, there's a lot of people in Parliament who are there for the politics. And sometimes I sit in Parliament, just this week. Like I sat in Parliament and I heard, and nothing frustrates me more than the mudslinging. That isn't about the work. I can maybe accept mudslinging if it's about you not doing what you're supposed to and people are still in the, But just, because you as the DA and you as the NCR, how does that change the price of bread?
Sure.
So that is a temptation. I think that's a distraction. The distraction is about getting into the politics of things just for the politics of things, and politicking just for politicking. And a lot of that happens in parliament. And you need less of that, and people who are there filtering through their heads their constituency, who their constituency is, what they need in this moment, what they need from even this engagement and this debate all the time.
Yeah.
That's
What's a constituency for a person that doesn't know? They just hear big English.
A constituency is people that you represent, put simply. So constituencies, some people might say my constituency is the rural constituencies, people who live in rural areas. Somebody might say my constituency is people from Gauteng. Somebody might say my constituency is farmers. My constituency is SMMEs.
People you represent, not necessarily people who voted for you.
Both people who voted for you as well. So you should be representing the people who voted for you, and you should have a good sense of, in these groups, who's the majority of the people who voted for me.
Okay.
What is the agenda that I carry that made these people vote for me? And Mam Kawola, probably the people that she attracts into the EFF are rural people. And she has to keep that in mind. And there'll be different people in a party who attract different constituencies. You have to always be mindful of yours, even broadly as a party.
Okay, I want to ask about the elections last year, but before you do answer on that, or before I ask, this thing that you're saying is something very personal to me for many reasons. Trying to hold on to who you really are in a space that is very noisy is my opinion why I think Trevor Noah struggled with the mental issues he's raised. I think it's the reason Dave Chappelle ran away from America when he got a big deal and came to South Africa to hide. I think it's the reason Lauryn Hill left music when she did at the height of her career with the miseducation. Some people, like Kevin Hart, will have people that they grew up with around them to keep them grounded, is what they call it. There's a huge thing. I think J. Cole is another reference where people ngenkani ngiyogibela itaxi namhlanje. Why? Nongisanje lamonti ngifuna ukuyothola nje ukudla. And you're like, why? You're like, if I don't do this, I'm going to lose my mind. If I don't, J. Cole rides a bicycle, he plays basketball. You intentionally have to work hard, like therapy, to be like, I've made it. I struggled with imposter syndrome. Now I feel like I've arrived. But it's like, if I start getting into this, I completely lose Nobuntu from Maristella. Nobuntu Wasenanda. Because now I'm honorable member. Hi. How Nobuntu Njan? Hey, panel. Oh, hi, honorable. And you're like, oh, she's gone. Which I wouldn't blame you for. I understand how tough it is. You literally have to go out of your way to fight to keep who you are. And some people would be like, just let it go. You're this now. And you're like, I don't know. And that clash, Jobangi, could affect your mental state.
For me, if I ever get to a point where I betray why I believe I do what I do, if I ever get to a point where I betray what I sought to achieve by getting into what I achieve, by getting into what I'm in now in politics, I do think I would struggle with mental issues, mental health issues. I do think I would. I do think I would struggle with identity issues. I think it would be difficult to continue. And so the promise to myself is I'm only here for as long as I'm doing what I believe I was born to do, what I believe I was called to do, what I believe is needed in this country. If I betray that, then I actually should leave. If it gets to the point where I feel like in order to survive, in order to stay, I need to betray that, then what's the point? What is the point? If you're then there and you move all the way up to wherever it is. And for me, part of it also is about changing the way politics is done.
Yeah.
I think there's a need for us to change how politics is done. So if I'm here and then I sell out to the status quo and to how politics has always been done, then part of the reason I'm here,
it's gone. That's why I was asking about One South Africa as well, by the way.
It's gone. So I still hold that what I'm doing and what we're doing is that One South Africa vision and mandate. And actually, even as a party this year in January, part of what we've been doing is sitting and going back to how do we express this better? How do we make sure that we are back to the blueprint that we put together and said, this is what we want to do and this is what we want to do well.
Yeah.
To what extent have we veered a little bit away from what we wanted to do and saying we want to be a movement, actually. We want to be a movement that is by people and is not even represents people, is represented by people. And that's why it's important that somebody like myself who wasn't in politics is able to be the leader in society that I am in what I'm doing now without completely becoming some sort of career politician that now you don't recognize. The Nobuntu who first sat down with you, if you look one day and you're like, yo, like, I don't know this girl now, then I've lost the reason. Then we've lost it.
How are your colleagues doing? I've sat with them, Musi Maimani, Ayanda Ali. Unfortunately, don't know all your other colleagues, but just the ones that I've sat with. Banjani, barait. Niapila,
Niapusha. I genuinely think we are punching above our weight. I really do.
That's a startup, boy. That's what it takes.
We are punching way above our weight in the spaces that we are. Ayanda and Gauteng is a single seat. I always say to her, must sometimes feel lonely.
Yeah.
But she is doing such great work. And this is no bias. I have never seen participation in a provincial legislature as robust and as connected to people and the needs of people as I've seen through Ayanda. I've never seen it that way. And so she's doing incredibly well. Musi, for me, there's actually a day we were in Parliament. It was the end of year debate, and so all the leaders stood up and said the end of year message, and it was just all like weird and messy. And, like, it was like what is going on here? And then there was also a lot of mad singing going on. It was the end of year message for South Africans, and it was all so strange. And Musi went up in that mess, and he stood up, and he gave a message to South Africans about the year, about elections, about what happened, about January, about where we are, and about what we need to strive for and hope for and do. And he gave a unifying message, and I was like, that was presidential, actually. Musi today was the adult in the room, and he was the leader that was needed. And that's generally how he moves and how he rolls.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And it's important to be able to show up as a leader, whether you've got the title or not. And so in a moment that needs presidency, to show up as that when you don't have the title, to me, says a lot about a person.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, one of the greatest gifts that he brings to the space. So my colleagues are doing well, and I think we are being what we need to be. And I think we're doing more than could be expected of the size of party that we are.
Thank you, by the way, on behalf of your constituency and on behalf of just ordinary South Africans. I'm biased, so I don't know if my opinion is fair. I obviously see the work that you guys do. Like I saw and I was doing like a mini documentary. I don't know if it's in Tshwane. But I wonder if I'm biased and other people are missing it. But thank you so much. I know Musi's voice is obviously very loud in education, and it's been even in the past. You guys were looking for 2 million votes, I believe. You guys were promising, I think, millions of jobs. What was your take with the elections in general and specifically for Build One South Africa?
It was disappointing.
Okay.
So you have to say that and you have to be honest about it. We expected to do way better than we did.
Why?
Because we really believed that we had a message that we thought would resonate with South Africans.
Yeah.
I thought we showcased the quality of leader amongst us, the quality of leadership that we have, the quality of leaders and candidates that we have, that we really believed is what South Africans need and we would have hoped would get to see. I do believe that we did our best in a short period of time to be visible.
Marketing, campaigning. You feel like you did enough?
I feel like we did what we could in the time that we had.
Okay.
So we did a lot. Penuel, I personally, in the 3 months leading to elections, worked 7 days a week, Sunday to Sunday, out there every single day, And the month before elections, that included a lot of media, a lot of TV, we were on the ground everywhere and everywhere around the country. Maybe that's one of the things where maybe we shouldn't have been everywhere, but we were everywhere. We stretched ourselves so much and we did as much visibility as possible. With the limited resources we had, we did billboards, we did posters, we did a lot. But the reality is that it's a short period.
Yeah.
And now we're working on making sure that more South Africans, because I don't believe that South Africans have rejected us. I believe South Africans didn't know about us.
Sure.
And so we're doing more work now to make sure that South Africans know about us. They know the work that we're doing. But more than the work that we're doing in the party that we are, just that they know who we are. They know who we are. But that they also recognize that we're trying to say, come on board as well. This is not us going, we're saviors. We're going, actually, there's leaders in society that exist in the shape of yourselves. Come on board and come and lead and represent your people and your constituency. And we're doing more work. We're gonna be doing even more than we've ever done in that kind of work of going, let's identify people and let's allow people to identify themselves who can truly represent South Africans.
I saw you guys celebrating.
What were we celebrating?
After the elections, with the results.
Of course we
You
celebrated.
guys looked happy that you had seats.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Because while we worked so hard and while we expected so much more, to get seats at all is not something you're entitled to. It's not something you're entitled to. So to actually have had seats at all, we have 2 in the National Assembly, we have 1 in Gauteng. It is a start. And I think we know what we can do with that. And so, of course, we celebrated.
Based on what you just said, maybe not for the national elections, but if you were to go back, would you maybe say we should have just focused on maybe Gauteng and maybe another place?
I think
in the short space of time.
Yeah, I think we should have focused on less provinces. I think we wanted to represent South Africans from all over the country, so we did all 9 provinces.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we should have done less provinces. That's something that we should have considered. I think so.
2029, maybe?
2026, definitely.
Which is local elections.
Which is local elections. Okay. 2026, definitely. We'll see where we are in 2029.
Sure.
I think what also happened is when you come into elections, you don't know where your strongholds are. When you come in for the first time, you're 20 months old. Yeah. You don't know where your strongholds are. Now, post the elections, and maybe we did have to do all 9 so that we'd know that. So now we know.
Sure.
We know where we're strong. We know, I can tell you off the top of my head, the top 5 provinces where we're strong. And so we know those things, and now we can focus better.
Please hit us with the provinces. People want to know.
Our strongest provinces are Gauteng.
Sure.
Western Cape. Gauteng, Western Cape, Limpopo, Eastern Cape, KZN.
Okay.
That's where we're strongest.
What's left is the Northern Cape, Free State, Northwest, Mpumalanga. Okay.
So we're still there. We're still active there, and it doesn't mean that we're not active there. We have Bossa people everywhere.
Sure.
But it means that you know how you allocate your strengths.
Yeah.
So how
and limited resources, man.
Limited resources. How you allocate limited resources then has to reflect, where you have the most response.
Okay. Happy with the GNU?
No.
Not, what am I trying to ask? No, let's go back to the elections. I'm sorry. Let me not jump the gun.
That's fine.
So you say you were disappointed. You guys were happy with your seats. Maybe, before we speak about politics, how have you been feeling since the elections? How was the experience of getting into parliament? Now you're an MP. Most of us don't know what that is. And when I was a newbie, I think you're probably like one of the people that could probably tell us exactly how it feels. It sucks. It's annoying. Or, guys, it's actually a vibe. There's food everywhere. Everyone is treating you like a VIP. How was it, Nje? Like from getting the results, what happens from there, maybe in summary?
Sure. From getting the results, there's a lot. You're going to just think parliament, but you also must remember that I'm co-founder of a party. And so you also have to come back and look at the party and go, okay, this is the party. It was a campaign vehicle. What must it become now? Now you're not in campaign mode. It's not elections. You have to become a vehicle that is able to deliver on your representation with these seats you have, that stays connected to people. completely, and how do you set yourself up for that? So that's the first thing. Before even getting to parliament, that's the first thing we had to focus on, is how do we make sure that we do that?
Sure. Let's go back home. Let's re-strategize. We're no longer campaigning.
We're no longer campaigning. How
Yeah.
does umsebenzi look like in this now phase of who we are? So that actually was, so there was no rest. Came out of elections immediately into, okay, what must happen now?
Yeah.
How do we move people? How do we set ourselves up to deliver on the mandate now? So that was the first piece of work. And then the next piece of work becomes, okay, now how do you resource for your work in parliament and making sure that you're able to deliver on the work in parliament? And I spent a lot of time having to do that work of learning exactly the nuts and bolts. How does it work? So, because in order to know how to deliver on it and for it, you need to know how it works.
Yeah.
So how does it work? Getting people in the room who have the expertise, getting people into the party of the expertise who are able to then navigate us through that and make sure that we're all well capacitated in order to be able to fulfill that. So that was the first part of it.
Do they have orientation? Sorry.
They do have orientation, but I did my own orientation before we got to parliament.
It wasn't good. Theirs.
It was okay. It was fine. It was okay.
Is the orientation just for newbies? Or
It's for
for
everybody,
all
actually.
these who also are like, hey, sing
Yes, it's for everybody. Actually, everybody was there. Everybody
for
was
orientation.
there. For orientation.
Do you think there should be
Pretty much
orientation
everyone
for
was there.
new people in particular?
No, I think it covered what you would need to know as a new person and as an old person.
Okay.
I don't think you need, and maybe I say this because, like I say, before we got to parliament, I sat
You'd already done your homework.
I sat with somebody who's an expert, who's worked in parliament for years, who's a technical expert at the stuff, and she took me through everything. So by the time I got there, I knew at least the technicalities of how it works and what I always knew broadly from watching parliament, but then I needed to know the nuts and bolts. And by the time I got there, I knew that stuff. So we get there and we get to parliament, and it's an adjustment, man. It's an adjustment. First of all, you're like the new kid in high school. Because I remember getting so lost so many times. You don't know who you are. You don't know where you are.
Yeah.
You're like, where's this happening? Where's that? You know, it literally feels so weird. And you can feel a little bit removed from just like life as you know it. So that was a bit of a weird period, probably for like a month. It's that. But then also at the same time, it's the opening of parliament and you must dress up and it's all these grand things. And, you know, for me, those things, I genuinely have always watched and had a struggle with. So it was also that conflict in my head of, okay, so now we're doing the stuff where there's a red carpet and you must come and it's ceremonial, you know, and all that stuff. So it was also that. So that was interesting. It was interesting now being in the thing that you've always gone, but is this necessary?
Yes.
Now
you're in the mix.
Now you're there. And I actually had to decide for myself, okay, I might think this stuff, some of it is really, first of all, I think some of it's colonial. So there's
definitely
a
is.
lot of practices in parliament and in just the general public, the way that we deliver on governance and public leadership and all this stuff. A lot of it is actually colonial. There was a tweet just 2 days ago that I got tagged on about a spousal etiquette thing for ministers' spouses, and I'll just say ministers' wives because I didn't see any men there.
Sure, no, it was.
It was
okay, let me not mention, but yeah, I saw that.
Yes, no, it was Durko. So, so things like that, they're also like, and I'm always like, why are we doing this? So there's a lot of it that does feel like that, and I do have a wish that, and I hope that we will one day find our own way, you know, and Africanize the thing, and
Yes.
even with the SONA, how do we find our own way of expressing this? Because it's important. It's important that the president actually, on the other side of it, addresses the nation on the state of the nation. It's important that the people who then represent the nation respond to that.
Yes.
It's important. But I'm not sure the way that we do it needs to find a way of expression that we can say is us.
Yeah.
For that, we've got to figure out who we are as a start. But anyway,
That's too
collectively.
deep. That.
Yeah. So we still have that to do. But then it was all that. And then I got into the work of it. And I will tell you, right now, I would not want to be doing anything else in the world. I love the work I do. I love the work I do. I love getting to be part of, first of all, assessing and understanding the work that is happening in various portfolios. I love being able to look at that and going, actually, I can now make the connection between all these reports and all these things that are said by ministers, that are said by anybody who's in government and who's in the executive, the gap between that and what's actually happening. I now know actually what the gap is. I can look then and go, actually, here's what we need, and contribute meaningfully, and say in a portfolio committee, here's what we need to change. And here's actually why this isn't working. And here's what needs to be revised. I can lobby my colleagues and get to a point where we say, let's push for this. Let's push for the minister to actually put this in the annual performance plan. To be able to do that and to be able to start seeing some of the stuff come through and going, oh, I'm seeing, like, if you know anything about us, we've pushed the issue of township economy, becoming special economic zones. That now sits as something that department is actually assessing and is now checking the viability of starting to do that. And actually for them to sit and go, Honorable Webster, we've heard you, and we're now working on this. That is rewarding. And that is a start. It is one way of being able to contribute. I can think of better ways. Obviously. You can think of being the minister yourself and being able to push that. But this is a way, and this is a useful way of being able to do it. I love the idea of being able to look at policy like triple BE, which is what I'm doing currently right now. I'm frustrated, and I've been frustrated with triple BE for a long time because I feel 30 years on, and I think, well, triple BE is 25 years old. But all those years on, when you look at the state of our country, when you look at the 60% of South Africans living under the poverty line, when you look at the fact that only 1% of Black-owned companies are on the JSE, when you look at the level of unemployment that we have in this country, when you look at across the various classifications in this country, who it is that still sits with the least contribution to ownership of businesses in the economy. When you look at all of that and you have a law which is bandied about all the time and spoken about, and which is languished by many as being an oppressive race law, it's like, for the way it's supposed to be so oppressive, it's really not doing anything.
It's doing nothing at all.
It's doing nothing. So to be able to sit with that and now go, okay, if I were to introduce a bill that speaks to amend this, or that speaks to actually create a whole new policy altogether, what does that look like? To be able to do that for me is incredibly meaningful.
No, you need to carry on there. Do you have any ideas if, let's say, we either scrap or change triple B, how to actually transform the economy the way it should be?
So let me tell you, as a first approach for me now. And it's going to sound terrible to a lot of people because, and I know Buyiseni Dlozi and I, when he was still in the portfolio committee for trade and industry, and it was really great having him on that portfolio committee. That man's a great mind. And it was a pity to lose him. Although I think we've gained him in a different way now.
Yes, he's joined radio for now.
Shout
out to Mbuyiseni.
But also, I mean, even before that announcement, in the couple of days that he's just been vocal, on politics in the country, I think it's good to have him in that sense. But part of what him and I would debate a lot in that committee was my stance on the need to invest in townships and in township economy. We'd fight because he'd be like, those things are the architecture of apartheid. I'm like, yes, they are. But what you going to do now? They're there. And actually, about more than half of the Black population live there. More than half, close to 70%. So what must happen? What are you going to do with Black people? Are you going to move them from the townships? What are you going to do? So now that we're here, and now that that is here, the focus on economic justice and on economic growth needs to be on where we are. Make it where we are. And that's when you can then have a policy that doesn't actually benefit the few connected and the few politically connected. And actually, ultimately, it's not race-based, because you're saying, let's focus on the areas that were most marginalized. And this is an area that was most marginalized. Let's focus on an area that was actually used and manipulated for labor to be able to, it was off the backs of the township population that the cities in this country were actually built.
Correct.
So then you're saying, let's actually then make sure we invest in those areas. And let's make sure we invest in us who live in those areas. And say, how do we then, first of all, the infrastructure and the very environment that is there, how do we make that enabling for an economy? How do you make sure that you are rewarding investment, any sort of investment that takes place? How do you make sure that you're creating, you're developing skills? How do you make sure that you're creating business that can be owned locally by locals who live in those areas? How do you make sure that you're specializing in the kind of sectors that we need in this country within townships? Research and innovation. How do you make sure that you have technology that's starting to develop? Manufacturing, which is so underdeveloped in this country, how do you make sure that it's happening there? How do you make sure that you don't have the social ills that we have in this country based off the fact that people have to leave, as my parents did, at 4, 5 in the morning from their homes and come back at night? And who is parenting their children at that time? How do you do that? And for me, that's the first approach that you need to have. What we have now has meant that all you're doing is you're getting a few people to get a few slices of the pie or to get a few seats at the table, and you're actually not transforming the economy. What you're doing is you're just giving little pieces and little crumbs here and there to a few who are politically connected, and it ultimately becomes for their own benefits and not for South Africans broadly, but also not even for the economy broadly. Because this approach actually then says you're even expanding the economy from what it has been, where it has been limited to what you call a mainstream economy. And you're saying, let's expand that. Let's expand that even geographically. Let's expand that even in terms of sectors that we have and that we're investing in and that we're growing in this country. Let's actually expand the economy, because this mainstream economy actually is limited even in how it can absorb even unemployment. It's limited in what it can do, not only for transformation, but for economic growth as well.
The township economy, you believe, if we were to put in more of a focus, would be a game changer across the board. Then we can look at other things.
100%. And not in the way the ANC has done it. Not in the way the ANC has done it. And I think the ANC, in the way that they've done township economy development, or whatever they call it, it's out of a lack of political will for real transformation. Because ultimately, the ANC is always about how they gain. It's always about how the politically elite gain from the system. That's what they're about. I think they lack the political will to actually do things that will ultimately really benefit people. And so when I talk about township economy, sure, it's important that now it's something they're considering, but I don't always have the faith that they're reconsidering, but I don't always have the faith that they truly have the political will to truly make this work authentically for the people of South Africa. I don't.
The fear of the township economy, not to defend the ANC, because I agree with everything you're saying. A lot of these guys now, a lot of the political elite and the connected have got share portfolios of friends that benefit from the way we've inherited the apartheid special planning. And some of these businesses make a lot of money in the townships. They're obviously based in your Stellenbosch, your Joburg, etc. And now if they empower the township, it's almost like empowering your citizens. To them, it's I will lose power because I don't have anything else. If I help these people make their own money, I can't sit on this board. I can't make money here. I can't get funding from these people because these people be like, oh, no, we're fine. We just want to expand and grow. And I think they fear that. So it's insecurity and just knowing or believing that they will lose wealth and not having a bigger picture of if we grow these guys, we can then invest in these guys. We can then have a bigger economy and we can help them export. And they're just like, if I'll mention the companies, you don't have to. If your ShopRite, your Capitec, I guess the liquor stores, maybe a KFC, your Pep, which are all businesses that are not owned by Abantu Baselokishini. If they are having competition of Abantu Elokishini, I don't get to have my nice share portfolio in some of these companies looking good and be friends with some of these people that maybe fund us in some way.
Which is bizarre because it's capitalists themselves who always say that competition is good for the economy. So it makes it quite bizarre. But you're 100% right. You're 100% right. That's why there's no political will, because they benefit from the status quo. And so the reality is that until you have people in power who have that political will, you have a problem. The president now in Sona spoke about 60% of South Africans being on social grants. And I mean, I always find it bizarre how the ANC is able to, in some way, claim some sort of victory
They celebrate it.
over that and celebrate
It's
that.
so cringe.
And that what that's about is what you're talking about, is about keeping the power and keeping people dependent on you. And so what you need, and I spoke about the power thing earlier, and it's always just this uncomfortable thing to speak about because our experiences of power and people in power have been negative. When we see people in power throughout history and all over the world, when we see people gain power, there's always a negative connotation to it because it's always destructive and it's always about self-enrichment.
Yes.
But when you think about it, what you actually ultimately want, and when I talk about a new politics, what you ultimately want is people for whom, when they gain power, the power comes back to the people. And the power is for the people. And that's actually what you want. The ANC are not those people. They've shown it to us. They've made it clear they're not those people. And so that is why they will not hold on to the economic, they will not let go of the economic status quo.
So you get into parliament, you go through orientation, you start getting your feel around, you're enjoying the work you're doing. Outside of what we see on cameras, do people really hate each other? Do people get along? Are the rest of us being lied to? And it's all just a show?
For the most part, people get along.
Yeah.
For the most part,
Not that they tolerate each other, they're actually mates.
No, well,
Some of them.
I see some of them. I see people have good conversations, good laughs, good cackles.
Yeah.
Sometimes even after the mudslinging that's taking place, you know.
It becomes something that they laugh over coffee. It's,
you know, it becomes that. And so that's why I always say, some of this for me is a problem because, you know, the theatrics.
Yeah, it's performative.
The theatrics and performance of the thing. You know, I've watched people in parliament get their people ready to, you know, I'm coming now. I'm about to do the things, to either film what they're doing or to cheer at what they're doing, and actually not even allowed to film in parliament. But I've watched that and I've seen that happen. And so the reality is that there's a lot of it that's performative. And when I spoke about the temptations of politics, part of it is about being able to always stay so authentic.
Yeah.
Because the temptation and the lure to the theatrics and the performance is real.
Yeah.
It's there. It gets a response. People are responsive to
that. It gets the people going.
But also it's the thing that actually South Africans respond to that. South Africans respond to it. And you sit here, you have people that are very, very popular in South Africa. And when you try to listen to the politics, you're like, this is actually just really empty. But it's because they're able to do the theatrics and because South Africans respond to the theatrics. And so it can become a lure. You just have to stay true to actually your reasons why you wouldn't go in that direction. Your reasons why it's important to stay authentic and true to the cause.
That's part of the fight. I see it with Twitter. I'll mention two examples. One of them is Musi Maimani, your co-founder. The other one is Julius Malema. Twitter started shifting at some point and became very important. Then it started people trolling and beefing. And I think they started learning how to clap back. And the danger lies in there's clapping back with class. And then it gets to a point where you're like, I think I'm having a good time. And you always have to check yourself. It's like, say, am I becoming a part of the culture here? Or am I actually just defending myself? When do I ignore, etc.? Because I can imagine we are reality TV people now. We are Moja Love generation now. And the idea of you, hey, wamchela, and the clip trends, and it's big on TikTok. The next time you're almost like, hey, someone's Nobuntu zothi namhlanje. You're like, no, guys. That thing I said that was not me. Or I meant it, but this is not who I am. Yeah. So please don't wait for me to say, Stindubacheli again. You're like, nah. And that becomes hard.
It becomes an important distinction. It becomes a really important distinction because actually fame is alluring as well.
It's a drug.
It's a drug.
Yeah.
And those are the kinds of things that can give you fame. And those are the things, like I said, people respond to them.
Yeah.
People respond to them. So it becomes important to make sure that you maintain your why.
Yeah.
And you maintain your identity.
Yeah.
You know, you keep who you are. So that becomes important.
You're married, happily married. Congrats to you and your husband. Your very black, very Zulu Webster husband.
Yes.
How has that adjustment been for you guys? Because my understanding is that you work in Cape Town, but your family's here in Joburg.
It's been an adjustment because But I will say, campaign season helped us prepare for it.
Okay. It was training.
It was training.
Okay.
In campaign season, like I said, I worked like 7 days a week for like almost 3 months.
Yeah.
And I had, especially in the month or two just before elections, I was mostly here in Gauteng. 90% of the time I was here in Gauteng because I was Gauteng premier candidate.
Yeah.
But there would be maybe 2-3 days in a row where I don't see my family. Like I'm leaving from home and I come back from home, but I don't see the kids. Only person I'll see is my husband for those few minutes because obviously he'll wake up when I get home or whatever. But I wouldn't see, and then I leave so early that they're not up yet, that kind of thing. Because now there's an interview at 6 or at 7 or, and the last interview was at 10.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that and it prepared us. So by the time we get to Mama's in Cape Town 3 days a week, that feels so much better because on the other 4 days, I actually am with her.
Yeah.
And I'm actually seeing her and she's actually here.
Yeah.
So it has felt like the better deal than campaign season.
Okay.
And so for the kids at least. And that has prepared us. I think for me and my husband, we've been married for 18 years.
Oh, yes. Siyabonga imbokodo zangempela.
We've seen each other.
Yeah.
Like siyazana.
Okay.
Siyazana. Of course, he always say like I miss you when you're not here, and I miss them. I missed him when I'm in Cape Town. But the reality is that fortunately, it's come at a time where we've been together for a long time.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to establish a foundation, or we're not trying to still establish.
It would be dangerous
ourselves.
if it was still like a new.
I think it
marriage.
could be. I think it could be. So we've been together. We've been together for 20 years. So.
You don't need some type of couples counseling when there's like a shift like that. You become the first lady, or not the first lady, sorry, you become the president. He becomes the first man. So for me, this is something similar. You've become an honorable member of parliament. Your husband, for all intents and purposes, is an ordinary guy. Would people that are married not need some type of counseling for the adjustment? Not just the distance, but would they, was with your wife now is now a this thing in society, and how does that affect you? How does it affect your families? Because for a traditional man, at least, his family would feel fine, like, manje mama akasapeki, akaseke ekhaya. Do they maybe recommend that type of stuff, or does no one speak about it at all?
No one speaks about it. No one speaks about it, especially as it pertains to women.
Yeah.
I have actually searched high and low for content on this.
Hectic.
I've started following women presidents. I've started following prominent women political leaders from around the world because I'm like, I hope somebody writes about this.
Yeah.
I'm reading books, by the likes of Angela Merkel and, all those people.
She was the Chancellor of Germany. Yeah.
So you start, I've been looking because I'm like, I hope somebody's talking about this stuff, but not really, hey? There is very little content on how that works when it's the woman. I think for us, we talk and we've always spoken. For my husband, he always says, well, this has always been you. It's just that now you're in the public domain, but this is who you've always been. This is what I married.
That helps.
This is no surprise to me. This is who you always were. So that helps.
Yeah.
And we talk about the transition and all of that. And we do have people walking with us and journeying with us through just our lives. And so that's helpful. But there isn't any sort of formal space for that. And I recognize that it's also, it's as challenging even when it's a man who's the public leader, because there's a lot that then means that, whoever the partner is, they have to carry a lot of the home life, whatever that looks like. We have made sure we have lots of help and support around us, in terms of domestic help, in terms of family, in terms of somebody who's able to pick up the kids and that kind of thing. So we've made sure that that's the case. But the reality is that even when it's the other way around, there's a lot of responsibility that then falls on whoever it is that is grounding the home. And so it's an important conversation that isn't happening. I especially think it's an important conversation for women. And being the person I am, I'm trying to do something about
Please.
it. Because we'll then have a problem where we'll talk a lot about we don't have women in leadership, et cetera, but then we're not making sure that we have the environments and the resources that help them to be there.
I want to plug this lady, Indra Nooy.
Yes.
She used to be the CEO of PepsiCo for 12 years.
Yeah.
first woman of color and the first immigrant to head a Fortune 50 company. I've seen some of her short TikTok clips where she speaks about the struggles of being a woman, a CEO, a wife, a mother. Tongue in cheek, she's got a great sense of humor and how
does. I've
her
read her
husband would
book,
complain
actually.
so she's helped. But you're very right that the conversations need to be held.
The conversations need to be held. I'm fortunate. I'm going to the States soon to speak. I've been invited to speak.
Dope. Congrats.
Thank you. At an event for and by women political leaders, and I'm looking forward not only to speaking there but to also hearing the experiences of other women. Because there's women there who are prime ministers. There's women there who are political leaders in different ways, and that's important. So, and I'm looking forward to being part of a collective like that, because that's actually also part of why I'll be there, is the launch of a collective that is actually bringing together women who are political leaders, and giving a space for support, and actually for even just engaging on, okay, so what's the need? What are the realities? So,
I hope you'll share with us what you learn. You know, a lot of us were raised and socially engineered to understand women to be the nurturers and the moms. And the concerns become, I mean, you're a mother of two boys, you know, the boys need their mom, Awuko. And I even ran a poll recently asking, this was now in the context of one of the leaders of another political party getting angry and tweeting against a secretary general. And that led to a conversation of, you know, women are emotional. This is why women shouldn't be presidents and these things. And I ran a poll, and look, I wasn't surprised by the results, but it is sad that a lot of people still believe women shouldn't be in such leadership positions.
70% on your poll.
Oh, you saw the poll?
I saw the poll. I watched, and I decided, and I wanted to, obviously, I have a vested interest. I wanted to watch it.
Sure.
And see what would happen. As somebody who's a woman political leader, you wonder where your country's at about that kind of stuff, and if they even see themselves being led by women. So it was important. So I saw it was 70%.
It's a deep conversation. I don't even think we'll have time for it. But we've got like a Mama Winnie Madikizela, who many people revere as a leader. We've had other leaders, you know, some still under... Mam Lindiwe Sisulu, you've got Mam Lindiwe Zulu, you've got Mam Naledi Pando and the rest. We had Ubaleka Mbete, we had Mama Mlambo, Phumzile Mlambo Ncuka, who almost became our first president, I think, at a time, but it was going to be a technicality. There's rumors now of Cyril potentially looking into a successor being female. We almost had Nkosazana Dlamini, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, potentially becoming president of the country, which kind of failed. And it seems many people still don't believe. And I don't like her as a candidate, but Kamala Harris could have potentially been the first. At some point, almost Hillary Clinton. Is there something we're missing? Or is there something that women like yourself are missing? Maybe there's like, no, everyone's right. And society is that way and it's okay. All we're saying is some women are different. And we're saying, Guti, for those women, can we please respect them? And if we are going to respect those women, then the men and the support needs to shift. Or is it no? Woman can lead. She can be a mom and still be, you guys need to change.
Women can lead. I don't want to say can. Women must lead. I believe that we've had a certain type of leadership in the world for a very long time that is very masculine dominated.
Correct.
And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with masculine leadership. You need it. But you need a balance. There's a balance that's needed between feminine and masculine leadership, and we haven't had that balance in the world. We've had a predominantly masculine kind of leadership. And of course, as a man, you can have traits of masculine and feminine leadership, and that's fine. But the reality is that your defaults and your strongest will be the masculine. Yes. And as a woman, by design, your strongest will likely be your feminine. Yeah. And what you've seen with women who actually do go up the ranks,
ascent to leadership,
and lead and ascent to leadership, is that they tend to take on masculine traits.
Correct.
And then you have a reality where now you're here, but you're not really any much different from what we have in the world, because you've now adopted more of the masculine traits, and we're not seeing that balance. We're not seeing your feminine leadership traits come through.
Yeah.
We've seen that in South Africa, and you mentioned a lot of women leaders, but you didn't mention Helen Zille.
Sorry, Helen as well, yeah.
And
there's a lot others. Angie Motshekga,
I-
our Minister of Defense.
I respect the fact that Helen has
Yeah.
been able to ascend to leadership and has been able to hold strong leadership in the way that she has. In our country, it's rare. We have barely had any women leaders of political parties, particularly of the bigger political parties in this country. But what we need to make sure that we don't lose as women when we ascend to leadership is what we're actually here to bring to the world, which is a feminine kind of leadership. And that is a collaborative kind of leadership. That is a nurturing kind of leadership. Your question on your poll about being emotional, yeah, you need some emotions.
Yeah.
You need them. You need some emotions. And actually, I don't think it's wrong. So if you're a woman who's then going to suppress your emotive side, you're robbing us of that feminine leadership. What is wrong is if that becomes all you are. And that becomes all you're about. I don't believe women are all and only emotional. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not. But that is a part of us that we're in touch with, and that I think is important to be able to bring to the table. So there is a place and a need for women to lead. Is society ready for it? I don't know. It's difficult. We have a society where, if you think of SONA recently, what you would have seen post-SONA, even in the engagements and the conversations, would have been male voices. In a 51% female population. And there were young people who, I'm founder of an organization called the South African Women's Commission. And the feedback that I got from the young women who actually happened to even run our social media and they actually wrote up on it was that for them it was so encouraging and refreshing to be able to see a woman political leader give her own commentary and her own response to SONA, because it was one of a few. You had a few ministers that would have been there and that you would have seen. But the majority, especially straight afterwards, you're going to see as men.
Yeah.
And that's important. So it is hard because that's just the reality. It's also hard because you still sit in a space where it can be, you can look at the South African landscape. You can look at it and it can be deceiving. And you can think we have a lot of male leaders. I mean, a lot of female leaders in this country.
Because of the numbers, like you said,
Because
51%.
of the numbers. But also in Parliament, before this GNU, we had 47% of Parliament MPs being women. Now we've got less. I think it's about 44, 43. And it's been skewed. And I'll say it plain out, it's been skewed because of the MK. Because the MK has got big numbers, but they don't have a lot of women. So it's kind of skewed it down. And it would look like, so when you look at the 47%, 43%, you think, no, women are in political power. But the reality is that when you then get to looking at it and filtering through the facade, when you look at the leaders of political parties, I'll ask you how many are women. When you look at national chairs, when you look at deputy presidents, deputy leaders, just that top part, just the key people, the key faces of a party. Key faces of a party will, depending on how the party is structured, what they call themselves, but it's going to be the president or the leader, it's going to be the deputy, it's going to be a chair. Those are like the key, and an SG. So when you look and tell me now, which of those, even the EFF that prides itself in terms of its numbers, do they have a female deputy president? Have they had one?
No.
Do they have a female SG? Have they had one? No. Do they have a female president? Have they had one? No. So when you get to the real meat of it, we haven't yet gotten to a place where we have, look at the ANC. President, deputy president, SG.
Yes, all male.
Men. So we're not there yet. We're not there.
I'm thinking Umam Patricia de Lille is the only leader of a political party represented in parliament that's female.
She's the only one.
She's the only one.
Only one.
What should men be doing? Is there something men should be doing, or should men just carry on as you were? Women need to be doing something.
Men do need to be doing something. You mentioned, rightly so, that Patricia de Lille is the only president represented in parliament. I'm the only deputy represented in parliament. And what that takes is that, in my instance, I mean, Patricia went and did her own thing.
Yeah.
Herself. What it takes is men who give space for women leadership. Probably think I said this to you the last time we sat.
You did.
It's important. I have that. And it's important. And it's rare in politics. Like, it's rare. I've seen how rare it is, because then I sit, in the smaller conversations and circle. And also you get to see the dynamics. And you get to see that sometimes even when people are in positions, they don't necessarily have the space to lead. And it's not a genuine thing, and they don't really lead. So men need to be able to give space to women to lead. There's even a tendency where, less so in parties like the ANC, because I think they have a culture of recognizing women to some extent. They really do. Less so in the more established parties. But you also recognize the thing of, even when there are women there, and how they are related to, as compared to how the men leaders are related to. It's the small things that you can't put on paper. You can't write them in a policy. So you could have policies, even in a party, that say you have to have 50% of women that sit in your structures, etc. You can't write the culture.
Yeah.
You can't write how the level of respect that a woman leader is given. You can't write that in. And so you notice it even in things like that. And so those are the things, sometimes they're even blind spots. I think sometimes men don't even realize that it's a thing they're doing.
No, of course.
So,
I can confirm that it is a blind spot.
It's a blind
Similar
spot.
to some white racism.
Yes.
They don't see it. They're just like, what do you mean?
They don't see.
Yeah.
So it's also about men recognizing that. But equally so, it's also about women recognizing it, because when something is a culture in an organization, not only do the men do it, the women then also do
Correct.
it too. And I think in our party, and I speak not only of our leader, and I always speak to this, I speak of other men that are in the leadership in our party. There's a culture of respect for women leaders. And obviously, starting with, I appreciate the respect that I have from the leaders in our party. And so that filters right through to anybody who's in any structure and leads. It starts to filter through. There's isolated cases, yes, where, you find that women are in some way challenged just because they're women. But more generally, because the men in the higher rankings in the party show a sense of respect towards women leadership, it tends to then become culture. So they do set the tone. It is important that men set the tone. And lastly, I'm going to say, because of the power that has been bestowed on men by society and societal systems. Patriarchy, by economic systems, by all the systems. It then does mean, realistically, you do need men to open doors for women and to allow platforms. And so when you speak about a Cyril, it would have to be him. If he wants a woman a successor, it would have to be him who makes that happen. He's got the power to make it happen. And so it also does become a responsibility. And nobody's here saying women are looking for handouts, because then it also becomes, then women are there just because they're women. They must work. They must also do it.
Sure.
And I saw that a lot during elections, when people were complaining about, but where are the women leaders and whatever. And when people are complaining about the MK not having women leaders, and they're like, no. Some people are even like, let the men, for now it needs the men. The women can come later and all of that. And people are saying women want handouts. No, it's not about handouts. It's about, in the same way that we speak about racism, and we speak about apartheid, and we speak about economic redress, and we say, we're not saying we want handouts, we're saying we want an environment and a system that enables for us to be able to participate in the economy. The same goes for women. It's not about handouts. And that does take, to some extent, not only legislation, not only government making sure it happens as it pertains to race, but it also means having white people who understand the need for redress. It does mean that. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself with a civil war.
Sure.
It means that. And in the same way, when you talk about gender, you need men that are also willing to be able to say, I'm also going to be part of making the environment conducive. It starts at home. Having a husband like my husband, having a father like the father I had, means that that was a conducive environment. A father who recognized me as a leader and empowered me as a leader. That's a start. A husband who recognizes that this is who I've married. And there needs to be a home within which she is able to go and be who she is in the world. It starts there, even before it gets to organizations and institutions.
Thank you so much. I want to emphasize something you said. And this is a message to men and women. We need to really, really make space and allow for women to come in and lead in a feminine way. In the same way, and we failed in this, because you're very right, it's still very much patriarchal, but you've got black male leaders who are still coming into spaces acting like a white man, which means yes, they came in because they were men thanks to patriarchy, but now they're just mimicking a white man and they haven't brought in anything African about that position. And similarly, it can't be that every black man who comes into a certain type of leadership behaves like a white man. And then when we start bringing black women in, specifically black women, it can be white women as well. But black women, not only are they going to behave like a man, but they also want to behave like a white man. And it's like, this is not real transformation, because Nobuntu at the end of the day is still representing a white male archetype, which doesn't do anything for what it is that you're trying to do. We're trying to create space for the people that actually feel left out. And if you're saying the CEO of this company is a black woman, and when I meet her and she's speaking about the rugby and Brian with the boys, you're like, no, that's cool, and shout out to her, but you can't use her as the poster child for black female leadership. You can just say she's a leader. Rather say that.
That is important. That is important.
Okay.
It's this idea that you need to assimilate. That now you're in the space, you must then assimilate into the culture of the space. So if the culture is a white male culture, now I must assimilate to that. If it's a black male culture, now I must assimilate to that. And that, you're right, then you don't have transformation.
Yeah.
Then that's not who you're representing. You're actually not there as a black woman. You're there as someone who's assimilated to something else.
Your thoughts on the government of national unity from when they came together to what they've sort of maybe achieved or not achieved to date?
You know, one of the hard things is being in a country that has needed hope so badly and that has needed something to hold on to, like something positive so badly.
Besides the Springboks.
Namapiano.
Yeah.
And then you get the GNU, which is now looks like something that it's like, yo, okay, yeah, we're going to get someone. And then sitting in parliament, sitting in portfolio committees, sitting in all the stuff and going, yeah, but nothing's changed really. And having to be the person who sounds the alarm to say, hey, and by the person I say there's 30% of us in parliament who are not in the GNU. The ones who have to go, hey, actually, no, the thing's not actually, there isn't much change that's actually happened here. I sit here because at the DTIC, there are 18 institutions that sit under the DTIC, Department of Trade, Trade and Industry and Competition. And of those institutions, some of them sit as the National Lotteries, South African Bureau of Standards, the BEE Commission. There's 18 of them. The corruption, the mismanagement, just the failure of some of those institutions, of like too many of those institutions, and the lack of political will to be able to change those institutions just tells you we're still dealing with the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's a fight. So that's the work we do, of sitting there. And actually, funny enough, with even some people who are from the ANC and who are from the DA, right? We sit there trying to change, trying to influence change, trying to drive a sense of urgency about turnaround and about actually delivering to people. It's what we sit and we do every single day. But the GNU was a function of an outcome of elections, where the ANC did not want to be a party that is not a majority government, because they could have still been the ruling party.
Yeah, as
so
a
to
minority.
speak. Yeah,
What's it called? There's a term for it. Sorry.
it's a minority government.
Yeah.
Even after that, you could have done it.
Sure.
You could have gone, everybody go back, come back with your plans. Let's go through a process of adopting.
Sure. Education, land, economy,
All
those
of
things.
it. Let's go through a process of, you go with your party, because, I mean, you're the ones that now hold this executive position.
Yeah.
But come back and then let's engage and let's debate and let's give and take and let's compromise, because we may have to. Let's do that. That didn't happen.
No, the ANC is not compromising on anything, and they calling out the DA's bluff on pretending to walk out.
Yes, 100%. But you may say the ANC is not compromising on anything. But sometimes you must look at who's the minister that is then supposed to implement that. You've heard a lot of some of the talk of the ministers, particularly DA ministers, now going, actually, we'll address this in regulations. And so the reality becomes that you don't actually have an ANC that's going, okay, so we're fully in charge, although that shouldn't be the case in a coalition.
Yeah.
But it might give a sense of, okay, this is the direction and this is just the way it's going to go. You don't have that. You have the ANC going, this is the direction you're going to go. You have the DA going, actually, this is the direction we're going to go. And this is the mechanism we're going to use to go the direction we're going. And that is going to be a pulling back and forth, I anticipate, throughout.
Do you think Ramaphosa did it on purpose? Because he's been trying to be diplomatic ever since, trying to balance different sides, opposing sides, even within the ANC, but more specifically in the business world and the majority of poor people in this country, to be like, look, I signed this act in. I signed this in. Let's clap hands. But strategically place people that are going to throttle it, and he's aware. And maybe even whisper in their ears that, look, I'm doing it for these people. You have all these tools to play around with, so that on my side, I can be like, I did my thing. Let's speak to them. And then on your side, you're like, we're doing something. And it never happens, because maybe he didn't want this in, and he strategically placed it like this, outside of maybe Health and Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, who seems he wants to push NHI. But the Bella Act, with Tusiviwe, I think, is it McPherson that has to deal with, is it public?
It's McPherson.
McPherson who has to deal with the expropriation. Do you think he did it on purpose?
If he did, it would have been a very self-serving move. And
for
it's
him.
all about him.
Yeah.
Because if that's what you do, it's not about accomplishing anything.
Yes.
At the end of the day. It's about keeping you in power and keeping all your constituencies happy.
Yeah.
Without actually delivering on anything. It's actually about not necessarily even keeping them happy, but I think it's about appeasing, just keeping people there.
Yeah.
And that doesn't serve a nation.
Sure.
It doesn't serve people. Might not even serve your party. It just serves you. And if that's the case, then it is potentially the most self-serving thing he's done throughout his terms as president.
Hlazo-Webster, I don't know if you have anything else to close off with. I saw there's a movie of Viola Davis coming out where she's the president of America. That's going to be interesting to see because she's brilliant.
And I saw there's a G20 and it seems it's happening in Cape Town. And I'm just like, this is interesting. I saw something about in the trailer. We're going to Cape Town. I'm like, oh, this is very interesting. The year we are hosting the G20. But anyway,
Jeez.
I saw that. It's interesting. Look, I just say, the last thing I'd say is that we need a new politics. We do. A lot of the stuff that you tweet, I agree with.
Hey!
A lot of the stuff you tweet, I agree with. I agree that we can't have the kind of politics that is dependent on benefactors.
Yes.
And for me, then it says South Africans need to be willing to fund their own revolution. South Africans need to be willing to fund their own change. South Africans need to be able to sacrifice and stand up and put their hands up to be willing to serve and become the change that we've been wanting so badly, become the ones that we've been waiting for. That's what a new politics looks like. think we need a new politics, and we need for when those new people, when those leaders in society come into politics, when people like myself who say, I'm not here to be a politician, come into politics. The most important thing and the most important commitment, it's a commitment I make, is to never ever betray the reason that we ourselves have come in to be able to change the face of politics, to actually be one that brings power back to people and that truly represents the people of South Africa.
Honorable Nobuntu Hlazo-Webster, thank you so much for joining me, man. I hope we'll chat again soon, whether on a platform or otherwise. I'm wishing you specifically as an individual the best of luck for this year, because before everything else, you know, in Tomazania Lamont Nasenanda, you know, I know your dad is out there in the universe somewhere looking at you proudly. I'm honored that and I'm actually inspired that your husband is so supportive. I hope the boys understand, your boys.
I must tell you something about the boys, actually. And I know you're wrapping up, but I must tell you the story.
Go for
about
it.
The boys. The boys, I was worried. You know, I'm away 3 days a week.
Yeah.
So we're in Cape Town one of the days. They're in Cape Town and we're driving past Parliament. And then I say to my husband, please just park the car so the boys can see Parliament. So we get there and we stand outside. We stand outside Parliament. We stand outside and there's a couple of people. There's always people outside Parliament peeking. And we're peeking outside the fence. And then I realized they're really interested. I'm like, hey, I can come in here. So I'm like, come, let's go in. Take the boys in. We ended up being there for about an hour and a half. Them just walking the grounds of Parliament. And them just asking me questions like, they're 11 and 16. Asking questions like, but Mama, is this the same place where the apartheid laws were made? Do you think there was an apartheid MP that sat in your office? They came into my office, like they took a full-on tour.
Yeah.
And them just being so excited about being there. They were excited about our parking bays, you know, because we walk past the parking bays and there's two that are written Bosa, because they've been there since the inception of Bosa. They've watched it happen.
Yeah.
And they're like, you guys are here. And I stopped at some point and I just cried. And they're like, what's wrong, Mama? I was like, I did not know that you guys got this. I didn't know that it meant this much to you. And they were like, then you must not know how important what you're doing is. My older son says, Mama, you're one of the 400 people in this country that work to change this country and that work for this country. You're one of the leaders of this country. Of course we get it. And that for me is something I carry. It helps me. It every time I'm away, I'm like, at least they get it. At least they get what I'm doing. At least they get why it's important. And of course they miss me. Of course I miss them. But they get it.
Sorry, you're making me emo. I was listening to Umbuyiseni Ndlozi speaking about his mom. I think of so many boys, specifically boys that are raised by mothers, and we speak about it, Mother's Day and Imbogodo, and they've done so much, but there are mothers who have given sons exposure and access to things that they would have never seen otherwise. And when those boys become something great, they're like, oh, patriarchy. And you're like, hey, you know what? To be fully honest, there's some Tombazani Hlazo that was actually the one that actually got us to see this. And whatever privilege you see from us, oh, these are kids of MPs. That's my mom. It's not some gent out there. And it's a beautiful story. I appreciate it. I appreciate your sons for understanding. I appreciate their father for understanding. And thank you, man. You know, one of the wishes I had leading up to the elections last year was this visual idea of 400 Springboks that represent us. And I know we're very far from it because I think a lot of people are sitting there just to take up space. But I'm inspired by people like yourself, Musi, a lot of the other MPs that I know personally or that I'm just aware of, who actually kind of get it and who are trying to work and who are not there because they were on some party list. And anytime people have to vote, they're just like, what are we voting for? And they just lift their hands. And you're like, they're not doing anything. So thank you.
No,
we appreciate it and we appreciate you.
No, thank you. It's always good to be here and to talk.
Yeah.
It's one of the spaces where I always feel like I can be myself the most.
Hey.
So thank you for that. And thank you for having a platform that allows us to be real.
Yo, siswami ngiyabonga.
Thank you.